and I'm very happy to go into any of those things in further detail. I just wanted to mention one thing that I don't like about it, though, and that I find quite perplexing, is the whole issue of creating property rights around the ability to pollute carbon into the atmosphere. And the perspective I come from this is that for me it's a fundamentally colonial type of activity to go and create a property right. It's a bit like Captain Cook coming and landing on the shores in West Australia, or in Australia, and saying terra nullius, there's no one owns this place, we're going to carve it up and give it to the settlers. And that's a little bit like what we're doing with the atmosphere, I think, and it strikes me as a little bit incongruous that the United Nations process on one hand is developing this Declaration of the Rights for Indigenous Peoples, and Australia's signed on to that, and it requires free, prior and informed consent before we go in and take property from Aboriginal peoples. And yet at the same time there's the Kyoto Protocol process, which is going down the track of creating a whole new set of property rights, and there's no discussion or dialogue with Indigenous people anywhere around the world about whether they actually have a sacred value over the atmosphere, or whether we're just creating these property rights and in many cases giving them away to the corporate sector and to the polluters. So that's an element of it that I don't like, and I think that there's other things like that. So yes, it's not the solution, it's not the whole solution. Does it lock in the problem? Well, I don't think so. Is it a step forward? I think it is. Is it about as good as we can get in the current political framework? I think that, I think certainly we need to be asking and pushing for more, but I think it's worth support.
Thanks, Piers. I think there's been a bit diversity of views there, and I'm sure that's sort of provoked lots of questions from people around the table. So I'd ask that people put their questions through the chair, and if you like to specify a person that you want to answer first, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll just go through the panel and ask them to comment on the question.
Were you going to speak there?
No, I'm chairing.
I don't know if this is so much a question, but my view of this carbon taxing is that it's weakened the climate movement. What it's done is divided and left all deflated and nowhere to go in many ways, and it hasn't solved anything. I wonder if anyone would like to comment on that thought.
We'll just go through the panel. I think Alex?
All right. I have to resist my urge to answer some of those comments I made before. But this actually does sort of dovetail into what Scott was saying before about, there's no climate movement to speak of. And
I was open to that.
Well, actually, no, it is a fair point. I wouldn't deny it. Perhaps it was overstated, but only a tinsy bit. It wasn't like the point was invalid. And in fact, you look around the country where the most inspiring parts of the climate movement, to my view, are really movements that wouldn't even say that they were the climate movement, and that's things like the campaign against coal seam gas mining, which in some parts of the country is huge. That is objectively a critical part of actually solving the climate problem in this country, but probably half the people in those movements don't even consider that it's a climate movement. And the sort of general, let's campaign against climate change or let's campaign for renewable energy, those campaigns are sort of small feat. Always with these things, you've got to start from where you're at and try and find the next step to go forward. And I think that, to my way of thinking, one of the best thing about, in some ways, I don't even think it matters that much about what attitude people take to this carbon tax. I think the most important thing is that we get past it and we start campaigning for the things that we really need. So that's in terms of the conclusion that that I think. With all sort of due respect, which is genuine. I think that the Greens are supporting. The fact that Greens have been supporting this package has made it harder for the climate movement to build. And to be honest, I think that there is a contrast between now and 2009. In 2009, when the Greens were against the CPRS, there was a lot more climate activism. Whereas now, when the Greens are supporting the government's package, there is a lot less. And I personally think it would be better for the Greens to be coming out saying this is a dodgy deal, but it's the best we could get. I think that would be true. And personally, I think that would That would be a political message from the Greens that would make it easier to build a grassroots climate movement.
I think definitely Scott, you need a rather reply.
I don't necessarily disagree with much of that. I think one of the worst things that can happen to a movement is the appearance of success. In 2001, when it looked as though we'd saved the old growth forests and banned uranium mining, both of those two movements that had been really fiery and strong, a lot of people went off and did other stuff. And there's still folk camped out in the southwest trying to get them out of the Jarrah. There are still, we had this amazing window where the Labor Party said, "Oh no, we won't let uranium mining happen," and then suddenly they weren't in government anymore. And in the meantime, a lot of anti-nuclear crew have gone off and done other stuff. I guess my view of the climate movement is one of the worst things that could happen is if we, and one of the reasons I think this is very different, is if we get this package passed, and I really hope we do, and the whole country goes, well, we fixed climate change then, that's wonderful, we'll go off and do other things now. And the reason that won't happen is because of the weather. The planet's going to keep reminding us until we've actually sorted this out. It's not going to let us rest. This package, to my view, is the first turning of the ship. It's actually the first physical, discernible, noticeable change in the way that the economy will work. And you can, from below decks, you can hear these tortured screeching and groaning sounds. That's the coal industry and Martin Ferguson recognising that it's actually happening. It's not enough to take us, it's not enough to steer us away from the iceberg. But I tell you, I'd rather have started that turning than sitting back going, well, that's not going to be enough, so we'll take ourselves out of the debate. Which is not, that's not actually what you suggested we do. If Christine comes out now and says, this is a piece of crap, that was the best we could get, that I'm not sure where that leaves the climate movement either. It's like, that's not exactly a call to arms. I think coming out and saying, given the current political circumstances, we need all hands on deck to throw ourselves at this thing and push back on the kind of counterpunch, which is pretty savage at the moment for people supporting the stuff. Get it over the line and then work out where to from here. Once we've got billions of dollars on the table that we didn't have before, and the recognition once this thing washes through that actually Tony Abbott was talking crap. This thing's going to be in place and no one's going to go bankrupt. Suddenly things aren't going to become radically unaffordable and they're going to be quite exposed. But the thing is surviving the next 12 months and getting us there is tough. The other thing I should say, which is a real weakness, which I don't remember whether you pointed out or not, is that it doesn't touch coal exports. It doesn't touch exports, and that's a big deal. It's about domestic emissions. And I think that's it wasn't even on the table to go there. It's this sacred cow. We're the only ones who routinely put our hands up and say we're going to need to phase this industry out. It's the quickest way to get on the front page of the Australian. But it's got to be dealt with.
Okay. Tony, or?
Yeah, I think it's called carbon tax. It's actually a tax on carbon dioxide pollution, but the spin, bringing it down to carbon, it's allowed a pretty, you wouldn't call it an intellectual debate in this country. I think the debate in this country is pretty awful at the moment, and it's allowed the spin doctors and that kind of hysterical reaction. So it's got everyone fearing now because we're taxing carbon. What's wrong with carbon? It's in our pencil and things like that. So we're all going to lose our jobs and we're all going to be ruined. It's that kind of stuff. And a lot of money has gone into generating the hysteria. So working people, all they see on their TV is about how people are going to be unemployed. But when you look at how the price of electricity is going to go up, let's never mind the fact that the price of electricity has gone up in WA because of the current government's policies, and the rise in electricity prices because of the so-called carbon tax is going to go up that much, whereas WA's put it up that much. Well, let's not talk about that. So it's really about who's controlling the debate, and big money is controlling it.